Hey everybody, I just wanted to state that during this video, I have used the term independent or indie when it didn't necessarily apply to all of the artists that I discuss. When I use the term independent or indie, I am mainly talking about artists who are not commercially successful or household names. So indie would refer to artists who were not or are currently not played on radio stations or on music television stations, etc. When I use the term mainstream artist, I'm usually talking about an artist who has commercial success. So they would be played on the radio, their hits are on the top 40, etc. There is a section of the video where I do discuss the difference between imprint labels, mainstream labels, and independent labels. But I did want to throw out that disclaimer before getting into this video. Okay, so let's start the video. Let's say we were in the year 2018. If you were to tell me that Doja Cat, Megan Thee Stallion, and Lizzo would be some of the biggest mainstream artists in music today and make Billboard hits within the next few years, while I would be ecstatic and hella proud, I wouldn't believe you. Now, this is in no way a diss or a dig at the artists that I mentioned. This has to do with the usual success of independent artists from the internet. Of course, the 2010s was ubiquitous for the rise of artists achieving critical success after releasing their music on the internet, whether it be DatPiff or SoundCloud or other online forums. And there seemed to be a type of artist who received critical acclaim. If we're talking about artists of color, specifically black artists, these artists were usually men and usually male rappers, with the exception of Nicki Minaj. Examples from the late 2000s into the mid 2010s would include Drake, Kendrick Lamar, J. Cole, Nipsey Hussle, and The Weeknd, who was an R&B singer. And if we're talking about the women who achieved mainstream success after their indie internet file sharing era from the late 2000s into the mid 2010s, it would usually be white women artists such as Lana Del Rey, Carly Rae Jepsen, and Halsey. These artists may have been signed to indie labels or not signed to labels at all, and after their songs went viral on the internet, larger music labels were interested in investing in them and taking them under their wing. But this hasn't been the case for black female artists in the late 2000s and even most of the 2010s. However, we are now finally seeing more diversity in indie artists achieving mainstream success, especially if we talk about Doja Cat's success after releasing her viral video Move. With that being said, do we need big name music labels or the mainstream industry as a whole to push artists today? And this leads into another discussion topic. Are we at a point where the artists who are not considered mainstream just as successful and hold more autonomy due to more control of their image, masters, and musical direction? Because there are indie artists or artists signed to smaller labels that are selling out stadiums, have large and dedicated followings, and if not more dedicated than many mainstream artists. So let's go back to around the late 2000s and the early 2010s. Due to file sharing, and at this point, the little reliance on streaming services such as Pandora and Rhapsody, the music industry was trying to figure out how to cater to the masses and convince the public to buy albums instead of committing piracy and sharing music via file sharing services, websites, etc. But at this time, people who wanted to become music artists also realized they could use the internet as their medium to share their content. Before the internet, your way of sharing music was by going to shows to perform or harassing people on the streets of Midtown Manhattan to have a copy of your mixtape, and one day, maybe someone from a major record label can discover you and put your song on the radio or your video on a music TV channel, and then the audience would respond accordingly. And this was based on if you looked the part or were willing to change to look the part, and if your sound fit the mold that the major label was looking for. Many times, the industry made a decision to push an artist, and the consumers didn't respond well. This seemed to happen the most when the music landscape drastically changed. But when the internet came about, There were new ways to share your music or even music video with the world. And this is where the artists gained control to release mixtapes, singles, videos, etc.
Okay, how do you view the internet as a promotional tool?
The internet is a big promotional tool, man. It's to broaden, it's a site to broaden out your music, man, instead of just keeping it boxed in locally, you know what I'm saying? So everybody else can hear it all around the world instead of just your neighborhood.
This was the beginning of audiences discovering the artist, and then major labels would pick up on their popularity that way. They knew what worked once an artist released their content online, and they responded by convincing them to sign to their major label. However, this landscape didn't seem to work out for everyone, especially Black women, Black femmes, Black queer, Black non-binary, and Black LGBTQ+. For example, Azealia Banks had a huge hit song that was released on the internet named 212 in the year 2011. And although it didn't quite make the Billboard Hot 100, it made an international impact, followed by a well-renowned mixtape named Fantasia in 2012. But it seemed like she was trending for her bad attitude on the internet rather than her actual talent. And this seemed to have been the case for Black women, Black femmes, and Black LGBTQ plus artists, especially if they were dark-skinned or fat. Either they were not being picked up by mainstream labels after their viral success, or the artists themselves refused to sign with mainstream labels. Although this artist is a woman of color and not Black, this was the case for Princess Nokia.
The different interesting paradox where it had like become a viral sensation, like very lowly, and I like avoided all this like label stuff, but I had been like across seas in Europe already, and like I was just this like person in the music world, but I was still like, I remember like I was broke. I've been emancipated since I was 16. I bought my own laptop. I didn't have anything. Like I lived with my dad, but I had to, provide for myself. I didn't have Wi-Fi in my home. I didn't have a laptop for a long time, and I didn't have a cell phone. I would always be at the library getting Wi-Fi or being on the computer. Most of the business transactions, touring, a lot of stuff I did in the early days, I was at the library.
But then after the mid-2010s, file sharing started to become less and less popular, and more people started subscribing to streaming services in order to access countless artists and content. And this is what really seemed to add even more control and visibility for the artists, especially the indie artists. Now, there are tons of debates on streaming, especially amongst smaller artists who rely on the funds they receive from their music. However, the sudden switch to digesting music via streaming services has allowed people to familiarize themselves with artists they would have never heard of. Out with the bougie music snobs who are able to access underground music via .piff, SoundCloud, or Tumblr, or an obscure website that you and your internet forum friends know about, and in with the endless streaming of carefully crafted playlists that can introduce you to hundreds of new artists a day. You can even follow artists and learn about any upcoming shows through these apps. In my opinion, the combination of social media and streaming is what has really saved Black women, Black femmes, and Black queer artists. They did not need that push from mainstream after their hits went viral. Although the three women that I mentioned at the beginning of this video had viral hits mainly from TikTok in 2019 and 2020, they were able to accrue more success by people streaming their music on streaming platforms. And once you stream an artist, you can learn about other artists with a similar sound, no matter if they are considered mainstream or not. Basically, streaming has allowed the public to become the music snob that fishes for new music on obscure websites. Only, streaming is the now mainstream way to digest music. So if we don't really need mainstream labels to learn about new artists, do artists need to be signed to a commercial mainstream label? So let's take some time to look at Doja Cat because there are so many moving pieces that are taking place right now regarding her career as a commercial artist. Right after the viral success of her song Say So in 2020, she was involved in a controversial live stream where she blurted out racially insensitive words to mainly white men. And then people were also finding old tweets that were read as racially insensitive to Black people. She made apparent faces at Paris Fashion Week during her performance of the song Say So to indicate that she was tired of performing the song. More recently, she stated in live streams that her contract forced her to do Taco Bell ads that she really didn't care about. She has been very vocal about her frustration over her long and tedious contract with Dr. Luke, who allegedly assaulted Kesha. And more recently, she had expressed her frustration regarding her tour in Paraguay and the violent backlash from fans, mainly due to the fact that Doja did not greet them before the show or when she arrived in Paraguay. Here's where I will explain my thoughts on the different eras of internet celebrities. The first era of internet celebrities, aka DIY celebrities from the late 2000s into the early 2010s, take place during the early age of the internet's musical platforms, online, and the early stage of social media, which was basically non-existent at the time. And at this point, I will specifically focus on the Black artists of this era. So these would include some of the artists that I mentioned in the beginning that rose to fame during this time. So Kendrick Lamar, Nipsey Hussle, Nicki Minaj, Wale, J. Cole, The Weeknd, and Azealia Banks. These are just some of the examples. In most cases, the goal of these artists were to become mainstream artists and get signed by a mainstream label. By posting their music on MySpace, DatPiff, YouTube, SoundCloud, Facebook, a website, or a forum, this would create fan bases, but hopefully their music would eventually be backed up by a larger label. Staying on the internet was not the goal at this point because while it reached an audience, being backed up by a mainstream label would take you to the next level for the public to better access your music. And digital downloads, mainly through iTunes, were the bread and butter of this time period as opposed to people file sharing your music on a torrent site or a file sharing content site for free. Social media was nowhere near where it is today. In fact, in 2006, when Drake released his mixtape Room for Improvement, he only made $304 based on the royalties. By the way, please watch FD Signifier's video on Drake because he really discusses how Drake's rise to fame on the internet changed the landscape for rap music entirely. But we cannot forget that there were some issues with some of these online platforms in the early days of the internet. Notice that I mentioned a lot of men and basically one Black woman who pretty much struggled to break through. A lot of these online music platforms, these online music blogs, were very misogynistic and homophobic, and a lot of the female rappers who shared their music on DatPiff were torn to shreds. So then we get into another era of the internet celebrity, which started to build up in 2012, but reached its peak in 2014 to about 2017. For this era of internet celebrities, I will exclusively focus on Black artists and some of the artists of color who made it into this space and this era, which is categorized as the alternative indie Black internet artist era. This space was cultivated by Black artists who did not fit the prototype of the Black cis-het male standards, and in a lot of cases did not fit the mainstream image that was expected for Black artists. This was inclusive to Black women, Black femmes, Black queer and LGBTQ+, Black non-binary, Black agender, Black fat women, Black men who did not fit standards of conventional Black masculinity, and dark-skinned Black women artists. Black artists that used aesthetics that were deemed alternative, and there were definitely different criteria that would mark this Black artist that would fit into this bubble as alternative. There were definitely subgroups within this umbrella of artists like alternative R&B, alternative rap, alternative pop, conventional female rap, alternative female rap, but many were not bound to one particular sound, which was a common trait that occurred once an artist went mainstream. This umbrella of artists were able to utilize social media in a different way compared to the first era of internet artists that I mentioned, due to the rise of specific algorithm advancements that were created on social media platforms such as YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, And although it's not necessarily social media, this definitely includes the diversity and algorithm advancements of SoundCloud. After the mid-2010s, streaming started taking precedence over the digital download, especially towards the end of the 2010s, and this would even affect Billboard placements. Festival culture had grown in popularity, and festivals for Black alternative artists also grew in popularity, such as Afropunk Festival. There were also smaller, new festivals that were created during this time period. Some of these artists didn't feel a need to leave their internet homes for mainstream labels due to their ability to control their image, cater to their niche audience, and make money on their own terms. There's no way I'm going to name all of the alternative R&B artists, all of the alternative rappers, pop singers, and many of what I would call the conventional Black female rappers that were not mentioned, such as Megan Thee Stallion, Cardi B, and the City Girls, also benefited from this era of artists that existed because they existed in a subgroup that kept them out of mainstream light due to misogyny in the hip hop industry. Some artists that have been around before this era of internet artists existed were able to benefit from the expansion of this space, such as Janelle Monáe and also Azalea Banks. But getting back to Doja Cat was from this era of alternative indie Black internet artists, and she was specifically under the umbrella of alternative female rap. Before her big break, she was enamored by internet culture and taught herself how to sing and rap using GarageBand. She posted her first song, So High, on SoundCloud in 2012. She then met the producer, Jerry Powell, who stumbled upon her SoundCloud account and introduced her to Yeti Beats. Yeti was able to get Doja connected with Kembo Zabe Records, which was an imprint of RCA, where she signed a deal in 2014 under the label executive, Dr. Luke, and his publishing company, Prescription Songs. This deal also came with a temporary management partnership with Roc Nation. She ultimately released her EP named Purr in 2014, and in mid-2015, she temporarily signed to OGG. Fast forward to her Amala era in 2018, which didn't really pick up for her as an album on a mainstream basis. And apparently, Doja didn't really appreciate the album, and her label didn't promote it the way she envisioned. Which is wild to me because Amala is a bop. It's actually one of my favorite albums from Doja Cat after Hot Pink, but I digress. So then, Doja did what she did best to get noticed, which led to growing her fan base through the digital release and memification of the video Moo in March of 2019. She released a special edition of Amala, which included the song Tia Tamara with Rico Nasty, an artist who had a similar fan base to Doja, and also the song Juicy, where a very cartoonish music video accompanied the song. What's so interesting about Doja as a micro-celebrity in the alternative Black internet world is that she was able to surpass the record label neglecting her by acquiring an even larger and more interested fan base through the internet and a year later through TikTok, so she knew what worked. The second era of internet artists that I discussed, the Black alternative indie artist, which includes Doja, catered to their niche audience, which was relatively much larger than fandoms prior due to the growth in social media and streaming combined. And because of this, when an artist such as Doja all of a sudden becomes mainstream, they encounter obstacles that they didn't have to face when they were catering to their niche audience in the alternative Black internet artist world, which was a safe space for many of these artists' personalities, physical appearance, and their agency. I especially think of the fatphobic criticism regarding Lizzo's body size and the discussions on Baby Tate's midriff at the Afropunk Festival, and the way people have now treated Megan after the unfortunate situation with rapper Tory Lanez has led to more criticism from fans outside of her original fandom. Another thing that stands out is how fast artists like Doja, Lizzo, and Megan have become mainstream. And this is today's norm for artists from the internet, mainly due to TikTok and how fast we consume content due to the effects of the pandemic and being tuned into social media for longer periods of time. There's no room to absorb the change and adjust to the fact that some of their actions, their confidence, etc., are not in that safe space anymore. And just because some of these artists are signed to indie or smaller labels doesn't mean that they will be treated with the utmost respect. Doja Cat was the one to really make her career expand after she felt the neglect from her label after releasing her first studio album, Amala, in 2018. She was the brains behind her breakthrough by using social media and knowing the algorithms, not her label. Where an artist like Lizzo certainly seemed to have a team that invested in her "Cause I Love You" era and supported her under Nice Life Recordings, an imprint of Atlantic. Of course, I can't say the same for Meg's original label and her label Battle, but she also took control of her career thanks to the tools and the outlet that existed in a non-mainstream space for the alternative Black internet celebrity. So this is future me here, and I think it might be a good idea to get into the different types of labels, because this can actually become very confusing. Based on an article from Icon Collective, major labels or internationals are large companies often under the control of a corporate umbrella called a music group. They operate their distribution and publishing companies. Major labels are also heavily funded. They have big financial budgets for marketing, production, touring, and more. They also have a large network of connections and influence in the music industry. Now, there are three big major labels. That includes Sony Music Entertainment, Universal Music Group, and Warner Music Group. All other major record labels are sub-labels owned by either of the big three. And then we have something called an imprint label. So an imprint label is a trademark or brand and not a company. An imprint is sometimes marketed as being a project, a unit, or a division of a record label, even though there is no legal business structure associated with the imprint. A record company may use an imprint to market a particular genre of music, such as jazz, blues, country music, or indie rock. And then going back to the Icon Collective article, independent labels are small companies called indie or boutique labels. They are generally not affiliated with or funded by the three major record labels. Also, indie labels work with other smaller companies for distribution and publishing. Many consider boutique and indie labels as artist-friendly. They also offer many other benefits that may be more important to the artist. However, they don't have the funding for artists that major labels can provide. Now, due to the internet being the big boogeyman in the music industry, starting more so in the 2000s and especially going into the 2010s, labels and organizations had to change their strategy when it came to working with artists. And this is where the 360 deal comes into play, or the multiple rights deal. I'm not going to get too much into this right now. So these types of packs give labels rights and percentages to artists touring, merchandising, and endorsements. And in exchange for these rights, labels usually give higher advance payments to artists and have more patience with the artists when it comes to artist development and pay higher percentages of CD sales. I'd like to come back to the point that the labels have more patience with the artists when it comes to artist development, because we are definitely seeing a change in the newer era of artists, especially artists that have come straight from the internet into a commercial / mainstream lens. So we'll talk about that a little later in this video, but hopefully everybody understands the differences amongst all the different types of labels. So going back to the early era of the Black internet artists, from the late 2000s into the early 2010s, these artists didn't have as much free reign because most of the time their priority was to get the music deal and work with the big names, the big producers, the big artists, etc. There were no big incentives for staying on the internet and staying internet famous their entire career. I also hear many people complain that the artists today, who most have now been birthed from the internet, have no gratitude and complain about everything. Well, that's because you're taking artists who had significant agency as a micro celebrity, as an alternative indie Black internet artist, that they don't have the patience or tolerance to change who they are, because being themselves brought them to a cure fame. Engaging with fans and being their true, raw, authentic selves allowed them to gain a fandom in a relatively safe space through the advancement of social media and streaming. So this leads into the big question, is going mainstream worth it? Although I explored two different eras of internet artists, you will always have artists who want to be mainstream no matter what. But we are now seeing a different type of success where artists are gaining even more control if they decide to opt out of traditionally signing onto a mainstream label. Wale has expressed his disappointment in not being as big as some of his counterparts in the 2010s, but clips from some of his concerts tell a totally different story as he sells out large venues and is invited to many large festivals. In 2018, Cupcake was invited to perform for Cardi B's Fashion Nova show. When she declined, people thought she turned down a massive opportunity that would help her career. But she has no problem selling out massive shows and having her music streamed. What I love about this moment in music is we really don't need mainstream labels. We, as the consumer, can control who we support and who we decide to follow as an artist. Due to the shift in our ability to connect with artists via streaming and social media, we are taking the control the mainstream labels once had. This is also allowing genres such as R&B to shine in a much brighter light due to the online participation from dedicated fandoms. If we hear a Jasmine Sullivan hit, we can spread reels of her performances on Instagram, TikTok, or Twitter and help that artist get more recognition. However, I understand why some of these artists want mainstream success. Of course, it can lead to the possibility of the artist making more money, but sometimes the big-time labels do take away that agency from the artist, or decide not to invest in the artist as much as the artist expected.
18, there was about, I want to say, 2.5 to 3 years that I was unsigned, that I was just making mixtapes, putting out mixtapes, and putting things online. But now I've been signed to RCA for a year and a half. So yeah, it's all great that it's finally coming to fruition, and my music is finally at the stage where we can release some stuff.
What was it like being at 18 and suddenly you're grinding on your own? You're putting out your own mixtape.
Yeah.
Having to, pay for your own studio time. Like, explain that whole, grinding.
Yeah. Well, when I was 18, that was really when I started, the grind process, of building a home studio, recording my own stuff in my room, making mixtapes, putting them online, filming my own videos, putting them online. And actually, I felt like it was a really special time. In a way, I really felt liberated that I had complete artistic control of everything that I was doing. I didn't have to ask anyone's opinions. I didn't have to, get clearance from anyone. It was the first time in my life that I was making everything 100% the way I wanted to do it. It actually, in a way, almost made me more hesitant to re-sign because I almost felt like I didn't need to. But RCA was just such a great partner for me, and they supported me so much in what I was doing that I felt like, okay, this must be the right thing.
Azealia Banks has felt this way when she was in the midst of releasing Broke with Expensive Taste in 2014, and she was left to release the album on her own. I believe over time, signing with a major label will become less and less the ideal in order to protect the artist's sanity. We are already seeing the effects of this now. And before ending this video, remember how I mentioned that the record labels have changed the way they pursue their artists, and they've been more patient with their artist development strategy. I am a big proponent of bringing the artist development strategy back, and here is mainly why. A lot of the artists who have been under vanity labels or indie labels or just imprint labels in general are not prepared to enter a commercial setting. We need that training for these artists. I know that sounds harsh, but it's definitely necessary. And I know that the record labels think it's a good idea to play nice and remain cool with these newer artists that they take under their wing. But if you are a major label, you should be responsible for training your artists to be able to know how to speak in interviews or to perform for certain types of audiences. And we're just not seeing that anymore. And basically what I'm saying is not every artist needs to be a mainstream sensation. Not every artist is prepared to be a commercial artist, and that is okay. And with digestible, I don't mean that they have to specifically follow respectability politics or anything like that, but it might be a good idea to maybe do a couple of more practices before you get on an award show stage and perform your big number, your big hit. Or maybe it might not be the best idea to go on a live stream and chat with a bunch of, I guess they were incels, and shout out derogatory terms on the internet because you are now a commercial artist. And that isn't all of the fault of the artist. Of course, I still side-eye the artist for doing things that are inappropriate, especially when they're under a larger lens. But where is their team to coach them on how to be more cognizant of some of the things you're saying during a live chat? Because you're under a larger microscope. You are a commercial artist, and there are just certain things that you have to follow as a more well-known, more household name artist. And that's just the way it goes. As always, I hope you all have enjoyed this video. Please like, share, and subscribe, and comment if you can. Thank you, and I will talk with you later.